When we talk about patience, we often treat it like a character trait, something we're either born with or not. We say things like, she's just a really patient person, or I've never had the patience for that. But this thinking is misleading and, quite frankly, limiting. Because patience isn't a fixed personality trait. It's a practice. A daily, deliberate, often uncomfortable choice to slow down, to hold space for uncertainty, and to let go of control. And like any practice, mindfulness, gratitude, or vulnerability, patience is something we grow into through repetition, reflection, and a whole lot of self-compassion. When I began researching human behavior, particularly the ways we respond to discomfort, one of the things I saw over and over was this deep resistance to waiting. We want answers. We want outcomes. We want resolution. Now. And in many ways, we are trained to expect instant gratification. We are taught that if we work hard, results should follow immediately. If we love deeply, we should be loved back right away. If we dream big, we should see progress fast. But life doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't work that way. And healing certainly doesn't work that way. Learning to be patient means learning to stay with things as they are, unfinished, unresolved, in process. And that's really hard. It goes against the grain of our achievement-driven culture. But here's the truth, patience isn't passive. It's not about sitting still and doing nothing. Patience is active. It's the decision to keep showing up, even when there's no visible reward. It's the courage to keep trusting when the path isn't clear. It's the strength to keep believing in something that hasn't yet materialized. The first time I really understood patience as a practice was during a season of waiting in my own life. I was deep in the middle of a book project, and I kept hitting emotional and creative walls. Nothing was flowing. Every sentence felt forced. I kept thinking, why isn't this coming together? I know the material. I've done the work. But what I hadn't accepted was that creative clarity, like emotional clarity, takes time. And my frustration wasn't about the book. It was about my discomfort with uncertainty. I wanted resolution. I wanted to feel like I was doing it right. But what I really needed was to step back, get quiet, and trust that things were unfolding even when I couldn't see the full picture. Practicing patience in that moment meant learning to sit with imperfection. It meant learning to listen more closely to my intuition, to my body, to what was happening around me instead of forcing outcomes. And over time, I realized that patience wasn't slowing me down. It was preparing me. It was building depth, not delay. This is something I see in people who are growing emotionally as well. Whether it's healing from grief, working through trauma, or stepping into a more authentic version of themselves, they all share something in common. They've come to understand that there is no shortcut to becoming whole. You can't rush your way through healing. You can't skip over the uncomfortable middle and expect to come out stronger on the other side. And the people who truly grow? They're not necessarily the ones with the most support or the easiest path. They're the ones who learn to stay present through the process. They practice patience with themselves, with others, and with the timeline of transformation. Now, let's talk about what gets in the way of this practice. One major obstacle is self-judgment. We tell ourselves that we're falling behind if things aren't happening quickly. We compare our timelines to others. We believe that slow progress means we're doing something wrong. But that's not true. Every single worthwhile thing in life, connection, mastery, confidence, love, takes time. And when we shame ourselves for not moving faster, we rob ourselves of the learning, the insight, and the growth that only come with slowness. Another obstacle is fear. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of failure. Fear that maybe we're not good enough to ever get there. So instead of staying patient, we chase quick fixes. We distract ourselves. We abandon the path entirely. But here's the irony, the very things we fear are the ones that patience helps us confront. When we practice patience, we also practice resilience. We learn how to tolerate discomfort, how to regulate our emotions, how to hold space for things we don't yet understand. And those are the skills that actually move us forward. So how do we cultivate patience? Not by wishing for it. Not by waiting for the perfect moment to feel calm. We cultivate it the same way we build any emotional muscle, with practice, repetition, and grace. That means noticing when we're rushing and choosing to pause instead. It means naming our discomfort and letting it be there without judgment. It means reminding ourselves, over and over, that we don't have to have it all figured out to keep moving forward. Practicing patience is especially powerful in relationships, whether personal, professional, or communal. Sometimes we expect people to change quickly, to respond the way we want them to grow on our timeline. But when we meet others with patience, we create space for mutual respect, real communication, and lasting connection. We stop trying to control the outcome, and instead, we learn to honor the process, theirs and ours. In the end, patience isn't about waiting for the good things to arrive. It's about staying open-hearted while we're becoming the person who can receive them. It's about slowing down enough to see what's already unfolding. It's about trusting that the timing of your life, no matter how messy or uncertain it feels, is still right on time. So no, you don't need to be a patient person to live with more patience. You just need to begin practicing. Moment by moment. Breath by breath. With kindness. With intention. And with the faith that every good thing, no matter how long it takes, will come in its own time if you're brave enough to stay the course. We live in a world that glorifies speed. Everything is designed to be faster: communication, productivity, even healing. We're told to hustle, to grind, to move quickly through discomfort so we can reach the other side. And while there's value in momentum, there's also something essential, something often overlooked, that happens when we're still. When we're waiting. That's where growth lives. Waiting is uncomfortable. It's filled with uncertainty, vulnerability, and a sense of not being in control. And for many of us, that triggers all kinds of emotional responses: frustration, anxiety, even shame. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly achieving or progressing, we're somehow failing. But the truth is, some of the most transformative work we'll ever do happens in those slow, silent seasons. The ones where nothing seems to be moving, and yet, everything is shifting inside us. Growth doesn't always come with fireworks or breakthroughs. Sometimes, it comes quietly. It comes in the form of reflection, of learning to sit with ourselves. It comes in the discomfort of not knowing, the ache of longing, the stillness between what was and what will be. In those moments of pause when we feel stuck or in transition, we are often doing the deepest work. We are becoming. I remember a conversation with someone who had just gone through a painful breakup. They told me, "I just want to skip this part. I want to be over it already." And I understood that. We all do. We want to fast forward through pain. But the skipping is what robs us of wisdom. The waiting, as painful as it is, gives us space to understand our patterns, to reconnect with our values, and to reimagine what we want going forward. If we rush through it, we miss the learning. And this isn't just about personal growth. It applies to our creative work, our careers, our healing, and our relationships. Waiting seasons force us to confront what we cannot control. They teach us to surrender not in defeat, but in courage. Because it takes bravery to stay when it would be easier to distract, numb, or give up. It takes bravery to keep showing up to our own lives, even when we don't know what comes next. I've seen this in my own work. There are times when I've wanted clarity right away. I wanted the idea to land, the writing to flow, the solution to appear. But those breakthroughs never come on command. They come after days or sometimes months of showing up to the page, even when it's hard. They come after letting go of the idea that productivity equals worth. What I've learned is that inspiration doesn't live in the rush. It lives in the waiting, in the quiet discipline of being present with what is. And that presence is where emotional growth truly begins. When we wait, when we don't force or control, we create space for awareness. We start to notice what we're feeling. We name our fears instead of reacting to them. We hear the voice of our inner critic more clearly, and then we learn how to respond with self-compassion. Waiting gives us room to integrate what we've learned intellectually into what we feel emotionally. We don't become more courageous by rushing through fear. We become more courageous by standing in the middle of it and realizing we can survive the uncertainty. We don't become more confident by faking it. We become confident by learning that we can trust ourselves even when we don't have all the answers. These things happen in the waiting. In the slow building, unseen moments that others rarely witness. And yet, because our culture is so obsessed with results, we often feel ashamed when we're in a waiting season. We say things like I feel stuck or I'm not making progress, when in fact, we may be doing the most important work of all, learning to be with ourselves, as we are. It's not glamorous. It doesn't get celebrated. But it matters. Because that's where resilience is born. I think of growth like roots. You don't see roots forming under the surface. You can't measure them or photograph them easily. But they are essential. They are what anchor the tree. Without strong roots, any progress above ground will eventually collapse. Waiting seasons build those roots. They deepen our foundation so that when growth finally appears on the surface, when the opportunity, relationship, or success shows up, we're strong enough to hold it. There's also something profoundly relational about this truth. When we allow ourselves to grow in the waiting, we become more patient with others too. We stop demanding that people change on our timeline. We start respecting the process they're in. We realize that just as we are unfolding, so are they. And that awareness makes us more compassionate, more connected, and more real. What I've found in my research, and in my own life, is that there's no such thing as wasted waiting. Even if it feels like nothing is happening, even if you can't point to any progress, something is stirring. Something is evolving. It might be the way you respond to stress. It might be a deeper acceptance of your imperfections. It might be the courage to dream differently than you did before. But it's happening. So if you find yourself in a season of pause, a season where answers aren't coming and progress feels slow, don't rush it. Don't shame it. Lean into it. Ask what it's trying to teach you. Ask how it might be shaping you. And remember, you are not falling behind. You are growing in ways that matter. You are becoming the person who can carry what's coming next. You are doing the work, even if no one sees it. Because growth doesn't only happen at the finish line. Growth happens in the waiting. When we feel impatient, we often chalk it up to being ambitious or efficient. We tell ourselves we just don't like to waste time, that we're driven, that we're motivated to get things done. And while those things might be partially true, they often mask something deeper, something more vulnerable. Impatience, more often than not, is fear in disguise. It's not just the irritation of waiting in line or the anxiety of slow progress. Impatience tends to rise when we feel unsafe in uncertainty. It's that inner pressure that whispers, "You're not where you should be. You're falling behind. If you don't fix this now, something bad will happen." That pressure isn't about speed. It's about fear of being left behind, fear of being inadequate, fear that our lives won't unfold the way we hoped. And when fear takes the wheel, it rarely leads us to places rooted in truth, connection, or emotional well-being. We often want outcomes before we've done the inner work. We want answers before we're ready to hold them. We want to rush the process because staying in the unknown feels intolerable. But what we're really doing is trying to outrun the discomfort. And that discomfort isn't just about the wait, it's about what the wait makes us feel about ourselves. Impatience says, "I need this to happen now so I can feel okay." But when we dig a little deeper, we find that the urgency isn't just about progress, it's about worthiness. We want external milestones to validate our internal value. We want relationships, success, clarity now so we don't have to sit with the question of whether we're enough without them. That's fear. That's the voice of scarcity telling us there's not enough time, not enough space, not enough love to go around unless we hurry up and grab it. And fear is sneaky. It rarely announces itself directly. Instead, it shows up as control, as anxiety, as the desire to micromanage not just our own lives, but the people and circumstances around us. We try to force clarity where there's complexity. We try to force outcomes where what's needed is presence. But the more we grasp, the more things slip through our fingers, and the more impatient we become. It's a painful cycle. In my research, I've seen this fear-driven impatience show up in all kinds of life transitions. People starting new careers, healing from loss, navigating conflict, or building something meaningful, almost all of them at some point feel the urge to speed things up. To just get there already. And behind that urgency is often a question they're afraid to name: what if this doesn't work out? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm wasting time? That fear is completely human. It comes from a vulnerable place in us that wants security and certainty. But the paradox is this: the more we resist uncertainty, the more power it has over us. Impatience becomes a way to avoid sitting with fear, but it also prevents us from learning what fear has to teach us. Because fear, when we are willing to get curious about it, has wisdom. It tells us where we feel exposed. It shows us the stories we've been telling ourselves about what we are worth and what we have to prove. And when we can name that, when we can say, I'm not actually upset that this is taking time, I'm scared I'll never get there, then we can start practicing patience not just as a behavior, but as an act of courage. Patience isn't passive. It's not about putting our dreams on hold or resigning ourselves to stagnation. It's about choosing to move forward with intention rather than fear. It's about being present with the process rather than rushing to escape it. When we're patient, we're not denying our desire for progress, we're acknowledging that growth happens through the full experience, not just the outcome. There's also something deeply relational about all this. When we're afraid, we often get impatient with other people too. We want them to change faster, to understand us quicker, to meet our needs before we've clearly expressed them. And underneath that impatience is usually fear of not being loved, fear of being misunderstood, fear that we're alone in what we feel. But when we name the fear instead of projecting it, we create space for real connection. We create the possibility of healing, both in ourselves and in our relationships. In our culture, where speed is celebrated and waiting is viewed as weakness, it's radical to slow down. It's radical to trust timing. But trust doesn't mean sitting back and hoping for the best. Trust means choosing to believe that we are enough, even in the unfinished. That our worth is not measured by how fast we arrive, but by how authentically we live while we're becoming. So the next time you feel impatient, when you catch yourself saying, "This should have happened by now," or "Why is this taking so long?" Pause. Ask yourself, what am I really feeling? What fear might be underneath this urgency? And more importantly, can I be kind to myself in this space between what I want and where I am? Because here's the truth, you are not behind. You are not broken because things are taking time. You are a human being in process. And the more gently you can meet your impatience, the more courageously you can meet your fear. Patience isn't just about waiting. It's about how we wait. And when we wait with compassion, with presence, and with the willingness to face our fear instead of flee it, something incredible happens. We grow. We grow in clarity, in strength, and in peace. Not because fear disappears, but because it no longer controls us. And that is the kind of growth that lasts. Trusting the process is one of those phrases we hear often, sometimes as advice, sometimes as a cliché, but what does it really mean? More importantly, what does it require of us emotionally? Because let's be honest, trusting the process isn't easy. It's not passive acceptance. It's not blindly hoping everything works out. It's a deliberate, often uncomfortable, practice of leaning into uncertainty and choosing to stay grounded, even when we don't have control over the outcome. And that choice, that willingness to keep showing up, is what builds real, lasting resilience. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about our ability to withstand adversity, to bounce back from setbacks, to adapt to life's inevitable changes. But resilience isn't just about getting through the hard times. It's about how we hold ourselves during them. It's about what we learn, how we grow, and what we come to believe about ourselves in the process. And the only way we build that kind of inner strength is by trusting the journey we're on, even when it feels long, unclear, or painful. The process, the real, gritty, unfolding of our lives, is rarely linear. We want it to be. We want the straight line from effort to reward, from pain to healing, from decision to clarity. But life doesn't usually work that way. The process is messy. It's filled with setbacks, detours, and long stretches where it feels like nothing is happening. And in those moments, when we're in the thick of it, it's easy to feel like we've failed. It's easy to question whether it's worth it, to wonder if we're doing something wrong. That's where trust comes in. Trusting the process doesn't mean we don't feel frustrated or afraid. It means we make the choice to keep going anyway. We choose to believe that even if we can't see progress, it's happening. Even if we don't feel strong, we're becoming stronger. Even if we can't predict the outcome, we're learning something valuable along the way. That kind of trust isn't naive. It's brave. It's rooted in a deeper understanding that growth isn't always visible, but that doesn't make it any less real. I've seen this in my research and in the lives of people who've endured deep hardship, grief, failure, loss, change. The people who come out the other side with deeper strength aren't the ones who had it all figured out. They're the ones who allowed themselves to feel it all without giving up on the process. They cried. They doubted. They stumbled. But they also stayed. They stayed with their emotions. They stayed in the discomfort. They didn't bypass the pain or force the healing. And over time, they emerged not just with answers, but with wisdom. One of the most powerful things about trusting the process is that it teaches us to befriend uncertainty. Most of us are conditioned to see uncertainty as something to fix, something to escape. We're taught to plan, to predict, to stay in control. But life constantly reminds us that we can't control everything. And the more we try, the more anxious and disconnected we feel. But when we learn to trust the process, we learn to sit with uncertainty without panicking. We learn to say, I don't know what's next, and that's okay. I trust that this moment has something to teach me. That shift from control to trust is where resilience is built. Because resilience isn't about never feeling overwhelmed. It's about knowing that even when we are overwhelmed, we are still capable. It's about trusting ourselves enough to believe we'll find our way, even when the path isn't clear. And that self-trust? That's the foundation of every strong, grounded person I've ever met. They don't trust the process because it's predictable. They trust it because they've learned to trust themselves inside of it. That doesn't mean we don't act, or work, or pursue what we want. Trusting the process isn't about passivity. It's about showing up fully, doing the work, and then releasing our need to control every outcome. It's about holding our goals lightly and our values tightly. It's about asking not just what am I trying to get, but also who am I becoming as I wait. Because that's where the process transforms us, not in the achievement, but in the becoming. Sometimes, the hardest part of trusting the process is that it doesn't always look like growth. It can look like rest. It can look like slowing down. It can look like letting go of something we thought we needed. And those choices, though they seem small, are often the most courageous. Because they require us to honor what's real, not just what's ideal. They require us to live from our values, even when it's inconvenient. And that's where we build integrity. When we trust the process, we build congruence between who we are and how we live. We stop performing for outcomes. We start aligning with our truth. That alignment builds emotional sturdiness, the kind of strength that doesn't need applause or constant success to feel okay. It's the quiet, steady kind of resilience that says, I know who I am, and I'm not going to abandon myself just because the road is hard. We don't get to choose all the circumstances of our lives, but we do get to choose how we move through them. And when we choose to trust, not because everything is perfect, but because we are committed to our own growth, that's where real change happens. Not just externally, but internally. That's where we build the kind of resilience that carries us through the next challenge, and the one after that. So the next time you feel discouraged or lost or stuck, remember, you are in the process. You don't need to have it all figured out to be making progress. You don't need to feel strong every moment to be growing stronger. You are allowed to not know. You are allowed to feel afraid. But above all, you are allowed to trust that the process itself, this winding, difficult, beautiful process, is shaping you into exactly who you're meant to be. And that is more than enough. If you found value in this message, I'd love for you to join this journey with me. All friends who believe in growing stronger through patience and resilience, this is your space. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share if this touched your heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, good things take time. Stay grounded, stay patient, and trust the process.